So, I've covered a lot of Metroidvanias here, and that's not going to change in the foreseeable future. There's just something about Metroidvania design that triggers some crazy fireworks in my brain. If you're anything like me, there's this satisfaction of coming up against a roadblock that you can't pass, only to later get what you need to come back and get past what stopped you before. In the past few months, I've played 3 good Metroidvanias that I want to talk about here. And each has its own different level of notoriety. There's one that's relatively unknown. There's one that you might know about, but your coworker Darren Kasperzak, he probably doesn't know about it. And then there's a very well-known one that is basically already a modern classic at this point. So I'm going to go over them and give you my thoughts and hopefully pique your interest enough that you might want to check them out yourself. The first one is Super Skelemania. It's one of those games that's always on sale for like next to nothing, no matter where you look, what storefront it's on. It's usually only a few bucks. Typically, those sorts of games are a little less reputable, but I gave this one a shot because I was surprised it was a Metroidvania, and I have a soft spot for skeletons, especially when they're just fun little dudes. When I first booted up this game though, I didn't have the best first impression. It was very slow, and I was like, this is gonna be a pretty rough experience if it's gonna be this monotonous feeling. I like when a game has a cadence to it that you can flow with a bit, but fortunately, Super Skelemania starts there intentionally and then subverts that for the rest of the game. The whole game becomes about gaining abilities that give you a great sense of momentum and flow to your movement. It's a nice short game, and it's only about an hour or an hour and a half depending on how you approach it, but for the few bones it's going to cost you, I think it's more than worth it. It's a great way to burn an hour. If you're looking for a difficult game though, this isn't the one for you. The bosses are really easy, and most of the obstacles and abilities are laid out in a pretty linear fashion, with not much exploration needed. There's not too much challenge here, but I'm somebody who doesn't really want much challenge usually. I'm just looking for a good time, so this game's a really easy, high recommendation from me. I hope you check this one out because both in time and money, it's gonna cost you next to nothing. Astalon Tears of the Earth is an NES-style Metroidvania. You play as 3 characters in a giant tower, and their goal is to take down a big bad. There's more to it, but honestly, most of the story just kind of rolled off my smooth brain. I'm here for the Metroidvania, not the storytelling. The 3 characters you play as are Algis, Cooley, and Arius, a wizard, an archer, and a knight. Early in the game, that means you'll need to go to a save point, which is represented here by a campfire, and switch your characters out, then run back to whatever you needed their ability for, and that can be kind of annoying, but it's not terrible. When I first started the game, I guess all 3 of these games in this video have this preface, but it left me with a bad first impression. Just because I was like, oh, is this a roguelike and I didn't know that? Because I'm really burnt out on roguelikes at this point. I say that because when you die, you always respawn at the same point, at the very entrance of the tower, at the very start of the game. But as Metroidvanias go, once you gain abilities, open shortcuts, activate elevators, the game speeds up, and you can get back to where you were relatively easily. It's still a little frustrating, and I would have liked the ability to spawn back at the save points scattered all around the tower. Then again, I can imagine that there's an ability in this game that I might have just missed that would have allowed that, but either way, it's still something that I found pretty frustrating during my playthrough. As I said though, maybe the first hour or so of the game had me a bit sour on the whole thing, but as the game goes on, it comes together super well. Another hook here is that when you die, before you respawn, you talk to this giant, death deity, who grants you the ability to purchase upgrades for your characters using points that you gather while you're exploring the tower. During my playthrough, I kind of just primarily focused on upgrading Cooley though, because I found her to be the most well-rounded character because she has the best traversal abilities, and she can attack really well because she can attack from a distance because she's the archer. A fun side effect of the upgrade system is that you can find some good spots to grind out points that you can spend to make your characters pretty ridiculously overpowered. It allows you to easily adjust the difficulty to your own liking, and in my case that meant I was able to become completely broken pretty quickly. Another thing that I really liked about this game is its sprite art, and specifically its background art. Yeah, it's going for an NES look, but it definitely has more of a level of detail than you'd be able to get on an NES. In the end, this game ended up growing on me, and I highly recommend checking out Astalon Tears of the Earth. It does do the weird Star Wars thing at the start though, where it calls itself Chapter 2, so don't freak out, there is no actual Chapter 1. But I hope that it does get a sequel or a prequel, because I think that there's a lot of really great ideas here that maybe with just a few tweaks, the sequel could fix a lot of my little issues and annoyances with this one. Bloodstained Ritual of the Night is a game that you probably don't need an introduction to, but I'm just gonna go over the basics really quick here. So Koji Igarashi is the guy who pretty much invented the Vania part of the Metroidvania genre by reinventing the Castlevania series as this more search-action structure with Castlevania Symphony of the Night. That game was a big success, and he was tasked with making a lot of other great Castlevania games in that similar vein. But eventually, Konami'd, and they stopped making the games that he became a master at making. So he left Konami in 2014, and after failing to find traditional funding, in 2015 he started a Kickstarter for Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. The Kickstarter was a massive success, and eventually, when Bloodstained was released in 2019, it too was a massive success. Even as a fan of games like these, it took me a little bit longer than everybody else to finally get around to it. But eventually I did recently, and it blew me away. But, as I've said about all the other games in this video, I didn't have the greatest first impression of it initially. I thought it looked a little bit odd, especially when you look at the 3D graphics up close. They reminded me of like 3DS models, kind of. But when you're in game, it's a whole different story. The gameplay and motion looks really great. And even if the polygonal 3D look didn't always look perfect all the time, I get why they went for it. It allowed them to build a much bigger, much more substantial game. There's just so much to Bloodstained, especially right now in 2024. They're still updating the game with new stuff, but I'll get into that a little bit later. Just for the base game alone, there's so many systems, quests, cooking, crafting, RPG elements, familiars, shards, and all of that right on top of the typical Metroidvania world design. Symphony of the Night had a lot of those elements, but this game blew the scope of even that out of the water. You can customize your character here quite a lot, and the story, it's not very important to me, I guess. But regardless, you play as Miriam, who is a shard bearer, a person that had crystals put in their body so they can summon demons. It's honestly, I found it to be a little bit dorky and lame, but I'm sure somebody loves it. Either way, Miriam is awoken from a deep sleep to take down another shard-bearer who did the whole Dracula's castle thing, and is summoning demons, and you gotta do a Castlevania on him. You gotta go into the castle, explore, do Castlevania stuff. Great music, great combat, great character upgrading, a ton of unique weapons, armor pieces, and a lot of weird stuff to find. The base game here is incredibly dense. I rarely play a game 100%, and I guess I didn't really hear, but I did 100% the map, and that alone should speak highly of how much this game grew on me, that I liked it enough that I found every nook and cranny that I could. I also fought all the optional bosses, which I'll just say, with the game being an overall Castlevania homage, the secrets and optional stuff here are even more blatant references to those really great games. I'll say though, one thing that did come as a result of being a Kickstarter game is something that did bother me a little bit, and it's right at the beginning of the game. There's portraits all over the castle of obvious Kickstarter backers, and I think it's cute in a sense, but it's weird to see all these dorks all over the castle. I don't know, if you're in this game, you're probably a dork, and that's fine. I'm making a video about this game. Look at me, I'm not saying I'm any better, but it does take you a little bit out of the game. That said, even beyond the base game, they added so many optional new modes over time because of the stuff like stretch goals. There's a bunch of playable characters that completely change the feel of the game that you can play through the whole story with. They also added a classic mode that is basically a whole new NES-style Castlevania game, and I'm not even talking about the Circle of the Moon games, which are the actual NES-style Castlevania-style Bloodstained series. They just added a whole new game in that vein using the 3D assets from the base game, and it's a pretty neat bonus here. One of the coolest inclusions, I think, is the randomization mode, which is pretty much one of those fan-made Castlevania randomizers, just built right into the heart of this game. There's just so much meat here on this bone, it's honestly astonishing. This game is easily a high recommendation from me, and if you're a fan of Symphony of the Night, you've got to check this one out. But let's be honest, you probably have, but yeah, either way, sure. And that was my video on 3 really great Metroidvania games. I hope you check these games out, and I hope you liked the video. If you did, join the 625-ish other people who've subscribed. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. Thanks you for watching. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching.